Well, welcome and good evening, you wonderful dice of all alignments. I am Lunar D8, and this is part 4 of Let's Read the Codex Infernus. It's a supplemental book for the Savage Worlds things, but you can use any D&D style game, or any kind of fantasy, or even use an art, or however you want. This will be a book of making, possibly might be a few more parts, but anyway. The Book of Making. This chapter presents an unorthodox look at the ways you can create weapons and items appropriate for any game setting, with themes involving demons and those heroes who fight them. Rather than introduce a ton of new weapons and items, we focus on broad classifications: angelic weapons, demonic weapons, holy symbols, and the ways they are created. The power of faith. The faith skill is primarily used for arcane backgrounds. Miracles, however, it is possible for any character with sufficient spiritual conviction and a spirit d6 to take faith, even if they lack the arcane background. The idea here is that there are plenty of people in this world who believe in the supernatural and even gods, angels, and demons. But even though they believe, they aren't blessed with the ability to work miracles. Probably the best example of these types of characters are Sam and Dean from the Supernatural television series. They absolutely believe in heaven and hell, have fought and even banished demons and angels, but they don't have the ability to work miracles per se, though it could be argued that Sam can. But I digress. Most of what Sam and Dean can do is non-magical in nature. This section provides some suggestions for ways in which the GM might allow skills to be used in your games. Knowledge versus faith. In certain novels, movies, and TV shows, what you know can sometimes be more important than what you believe. And anyone can create holy water as long as they know how to perform the blessing. GMs who wish to reflect this interpretation may allow players to roll knowledge of religion, or perhaps even knowledge of occult instead of faith, and ignore the fatigue on natural one. It kind of reminds me of Jay and Silent Bob, the movie Dogma. Though, have you ever watched Clerks or any of the rest of or Mallrats? I don't know. I'm actually looking forward to the Snyder cut of Justice League. I'm one of those people that actually not only enjoyed the original Justice League movie by Zack Snyder, I actually enjoyed Batman vs. Superman. Though I feel like one thing we really missed out with the Jared Leto Joker, while I do prefer Heath Ledger and Joaquin Phoenix, and I found those movies amazing, I think we missed something with Jared Leto. Think about it. The Arkham games, particularly not Arkham Asylum, not Arkham City, not Arkham Knight, but the game Arkham Origins. There's a scene in there where Batman is just beating the shit, just punching the Joker in the face over and over a lot. Imagine if we had that, a fight scene between Ben Affleck Batman and Jared Leto Joker. Imagine that fight scene, especially just Jared Leto getting punched in the face over and over. And I'll say this. While I do think Joaquin Phoenix, Jack Nicholson, Heath Ledger, and of course Mark Hamill as the voice of the cartoon Joker are iconic and amazing, keep in mind there's that Gotham TV series, and there's other interpretations of the Joker. Jared Leto is just a different one. And we'll see more of that Joker in the Justice League movie. Apparently it's one where he has long hair or something. I don't know, and we'll get to see Darkseid. I'm actually looking forward to that movie and getting it on DVD. I said, the Batman vs. Superman movie by Zack Snyder, I actually found very exciting. I wasn't bored a single moment, and it was like, for me, I greatly enjoyed that movie. And I actually did enjoy the Jared Leto Joker in Suicide Squad. I actually wanted to see more of the Jared Leto Joker. Now, yes, I like Heath Ledger's performance much better. I like Mark Hamill far better, Jack Nicholson, and Joaquin Phoenix. I like all of them are like far more superb, just marvelous portrayals, each one unique in their own regard, but each wonderful. Jared Leto, I don't feel his performance lives up to theirs, but I still appreciate the additional interpretation and existence, and just it's a different take on Shakespeare. We may not agree with that interpretation of it, but it's wonderful to have a different flavor. It's like butter pecan ice cream. I don't like butter pecan ice cream, but it's good that it exists. I'm glad I at least tried it once. Rocky Road's a lot better. And of course, chocolate. Vanilla's okay, so is strawberry. And some things like butter pecan's just nasty. I don't like it. But I really like Rocky Road and chocolate and flavors like that. Might But yeah, hopefully everyone out there is having a good day. Let's continue with reading our book of making. Holy symbols. A holy symbol is not a magical item in its own right, but rather it serves as a focus for the wielder's faith. The abilities described here only apply when wielding a symbol of your own faith, and only work on supernaturally evil creatures such as demons and the undead. Characters brandishing a symbol of their faith can attempt to drive off evil foes. This is resolved by the test of will, using the character's faith opposed by the target's spirit, except it has a maximum range equal to the character's spirit, and the target is panicked or on a raise instead of just being shaken. It is possible to make touch attacks with the holy symbol. If the attack hits, roll faith for the damage, adding the standard d6 bonus damage on a raise. A holy symbol can be used to pin an evil creature in place. This is resolved like a grapple attack, except it has a range of spirit. The character uses faith for all of their rolls, and their opponent rolls spirit to resist or escape. Unlike the normal grapple maneuver, the character cannot attempt to damage their opponent on subsequent rounds, and if they move or become shaken, then the creature is automatically released. Blessings. Any believer can utter a prayer, and any priest can speak the words of benediction. But a true blessing is more than mere words and gestures. A true blessing involves channeling heavenly power through one's faith, with the hero turning his own body into a divine conduit. Only characters with a faith skill of d6 or higher can grant a true blessing. This process requires about a minute, 10 rounds, and a successful faith roll, and a natural 1 on the faith die, regardless of the wild die, causes an automatic level of fatigue, as if from lack of sleep. A single blessing can transform a number of liters of water equal to your faith die into holy water. A flask of holy water can be thrown with a range of 3, 6, and 12 and shatters on impact, inflicting 2d6 damage to supernaturally evil creatures. A blessed weapon or blessed weapon, depending on how you want to enunciate it, used as an holy symbol when wielded by others of the same faith, both for driving off evil creatures and for touching them. If used for an actual attack, a raise on the attack roll allows the character to roll their faith instead of the normal d6 bonus damage die. Blessed weapons can harm incorporeal evil creatures. Blessing someone, including yourself, requires spending a penny and making a faith roll. If the roll is successful, the recipient gains a +1 bonus to all fear checks and opposed rolls resisting supernaturally evil creatures. While on a raise, they also receive a penny. This benefit lasts for the remainder of the session. Purification. Those with a faith skill can also perform a purification. An area can be spiritually cleansed through consecration, and if it was already dedicated to the character's faith, such as a church, it becomes holy ground. This ritual is resolved as a dramatic task, with each action requiring sufficient time to walk a full circle around the area to be consecrated. Supernaturally evil creatures treat holy ground as difficult ground for movement purposes and suffer a -2 penalty to all spirit rolls within the area. Corpses that have been buried on holy ground are immune to necromancy and other forms of evil magic. Yoga is kind of interesting. Also, breathing exercises known as Qigong, CHI space KUNG. It's very interesting to try. Plus, if you ever watched the Street Fighter movie with Ryu and Ken when they're doing their training, both the light Hado and dark Hado, the body movements they do, I know it doesn't actually do anything, but it's kind of fun to just copy their, movements. It's kind of like the lazy man's Tai Chi, but it's kind of fun to do those. But then again, we've all done Kamehameha waves, in the water at pools. Oh, that reminds me. Now there's 4 things you traditionally cannot do in your dreams, whether it's lucid or not. Traditionally, you cannot read or write, you cannot look in mirrors, or rather you shouldn't, and you cannot flip light switches to alter light. I still have a lamp lit too, and our light there. It's kind of hard to get light here in this area for this. But the 4th thing is you normally cannot use electronics, particularly smartphones. But while you can technically look in a mirror, it's not recommended. And I actually have used swords, made stuff, copied anime abilities, flown, and even fired off Kamehameha waves and fireballs in dreams. That being said, it's never a good idea to look in the mirror in a dream. It usually has consequences. Just scaring the shit out of yourself, really. Beyond that, I mean, yeah, you can't really read or write. And it's hard to navigate certain spaces, and trying to change light sources tends to be an issue. But here recently, I found that I can actually use electronics in my dreams. Though there have been a few nightmares I've been in where I would actually use my phone and try to call 911. So, granted, it's a smartphone, and granted, I'm not really using it for anything else, but it's interesting that I'm actually. But it's also, there's numerous studies saying whether or not watching television or exposure to such, especially colored televisions, will affect your ability to dream. Then again, there's things about certain sound waves and about how it affects your brain chemistry. And of course, people that do shrooms and psilocybin, DMT, ayahuasca, any of that stuff. But of course, I would not recommend it because it is illegal. And well, YouTube's pretty clear that you shouldn't recommend illegal drugs. So, for the sake of YouTube's concerns, don't do drugs. Also, as with every stream and every video I ever do, I click the not suitable for kids option because really, if you're under 18, you shouldn't be watching this video. I cuss a lot and, I cuss a lot. So, yeah. That being said, I don't know. I think my reaction to certain things sometimes changes. I guess, I don't know, the way I feel about things shifts sometimes. It's not a big deal. I think everyone feels that way sometimes. What was I talking about? Something with... what was it again? Where was I? But then again, there's also multiple experiments that are worth considering. There's the Milgram experiment. I believe that's one in concept of what would happen if you had an authority figure tell somebody to shock someone to the point of death. And we found that if a person of authority tells someone to do something, we're kind of conditioned to just obey and do as we're told, even to the point of killing someone. So the Milgram experiment is definitely something I would recommend looking into, though it's probably to be considered a bit unethical. Though a more unethical experiment, though I think it's called something else, actually, this might be a Milgram experiment. The one about the shocking people might be called something else. There's also an experiment that took a bunch of monkeys. And what they did is they took the monkeys away from other monkeys and had them raised with artificial monkeys. One covered in metal wires that had a source of food, and the other that's a stuffed animal. But the point is, they took monkeys, which are perhaps socially similar to us as humans, and they isolated them, and they had them around basically complete isolation and a lack of, though when reintroduced into the society with the rest of the monkeys, they usually all killed themselves or couldn't really function. So, Suppose the point I'm going to is animal psychology. Then again, there's experiments where you take earthworms and every time it turns left, you shock it, and then it'll turn right the rest of its life. Or take an elephant. If you take an elephant when it's very young, and you make a very sturdy chain around its leg and tie it to a big, strong tree, that baby elephant will learn that no matter how hard it struggles, it cannot move. To the point that it understands that if there's anything around its leg, it can't move. Which then, in the future, you can just take a piece of twine, tie it around the elephant's leg, and just tie it to a stick, just a light little stick that's not even in the ground. And just toss that the elephant could easily move if it were to try, with no effort. But the elephant will feel that around its leg, and it won't even try. Which, I suppose, my biggest lesson to all of you is, one, be social, make friends, do what makes you happy. Don't blindly obey authority. You know, if someone tells you to do something that hurts somebody, don't. You have a right to reasonably object to being told to hurt people. It's not right to hurt people. Another thing worth interesting is 1948, the UN, or the United Nations, and in accordance with Geneva and a bunch of other conventions, in 1948, they came up with a list of 30 basic human rights. I would suggest everybody look into that. Then again, I would also suggest everybody read the Constitution. Because the whole point of the Constitution is, we're supposed to be a country of free-thinking individuals who respect each other's opinions. And there's many people out there who have political opinions that are vastly different than my own, but I would never dream of trying to silence their opinions, because that would make me a very bad person to do so. And I like the idea that our country is based on the idea that everyone has a right to communicate and talk to each other and share and talk about their feelings and their opinions. And, you're allowed to speak up if you see something you disagree with, if you see something wrong in society. Especially back in the past, before I was born, the time of where things were like segregation and slavery were a thing. I mean, there were many people back then who spoke out on slavery about just what a horrible thing it was. And that's something I can't even begin to fathom, and something I hope I never fully understand, because that's such a horrible thing, how people were treated as property. I mean, then again, there's still people out there being treated badly. There's Chinese sweatshops for a lot of companies that there's still slave labor existing out there. And it's not right. Whether it be, sweatshops, sex trafficking, people pushing tons of drugs. I would definitely say never ever touch heroin or meth or any of that stuff. That stuff will ruin your brain chemistry, perhaps permanently. Usually it's permanent brain damage. Though, if you do have a loved one who's done that stuff, I'd say don't give up on them, but at the same time, that's got to be so painful for you at that point. It's just, when you see somebody go through that, it's like they're not the same person anymore. And it's just, I don't want to say anything disheartening to anyone who's trying to fight for someone they care about, but it does seem hopeless. But I hope that all of you out there have more strength than I do, and that you can keep fighting for what you believe in. But I like the idea that everyone can talk to each other, and the idea is that everyone should be able to come together and calmly discuss, what we think we should do. Heck, I had seen a thing on the news when I was at the doctor's earlier, and I got to go back to the other hospital because they didn't have the person with the blood work there to do that, so I had to go to the other building in town. But I got to wait on that, so I'll probably be doing that shortly after this video. So I really don't like needles, but one thing I found is I have to actually continue breathing. Otherwise, I guess blood doesn't really work very well when it pumps out. I don't really understand it. I'm not a doctor. But All I know is my initial reaction to when I get needles in me and they draw blood is I tend to just stop breathing and freeze up. And that's not good. So I have to like force myself to like keep taking calm, deep, long breaths and have a controlled breathing. But it's weird though. Sometimes when I see blood, I get all mortified and like super freaked out. And other times I'll actually start laughing and I just feel really happy and like it's just it's just fun, like kinetic sand. And but then again, that's kind of the way with my mind sometimes. Like, and sometimes there's a dramatic shift between being super lonely and wanting a hug, and between extremely antisocial and hating everyone. And a lot of times, especially when it comes to certain opinions or political ideologies, I actually have both extremes as opinions that I actually hold. And it's not even an issue of hypocrisy, because hypocrisy is you're pretending to be one while you're actually the other. I strongly believe in both. I have lots of things that I feel strongly about, that I have very strongly contradicting opinions, that I have multiple viewpoints on individual ideas and concepts, that they're contradictions. They're differing viewpoints so perpendicular to each other that they shouldn't exist in the same mind. And it's not even an idea of being open, it's that it's just, I feel very conflicted. And when it comes to several things, I feel very conflicted for and against certain principles. And sometimes, maybe just depending on how depressed I am, it might strongly change my viewpoint of certain things. Maybe sometimes I just need better sleep or just to be happier, I guess, in order to not be an asshole. But at the very least, no matter how angry I get, I can be nice to other people. But the way I feel is just, I contradict, my mind in itself contradicts itself all the time, and it's very confusing. But my biggest thing is, like I said, look at the 30 rights that the United Nations came up with in 1948. It's very interesting, and I strongly recommend it. And the whole point of the Constitution, whether you're an American or not, is simply the idea that it's supposed to be a prince. It's supposed to be, the idea behind it is that government, a lot of times people want to abuse power, and usually the people that want to abuse power will gravitate to positions of power. The whole point of the Constitution is that in the situation where we have politicians who are corrupt, or lie, or cheat, steal, take bribes, it's supposed to be a safeguard that even if we have very corrupt people, it's supposed to minimize the amount of damage that they can do. And it's supposed to allow people to be educated and talk to each other so that we can prevent things like the Holocaust from happening. I know I've said it multiple times, and it's depressing that, all those people died. Millions and millions of people died. And it's just, if anything, there was something that should have had a supernatural involvement of God, I feel like that should have been something. And the heavens don't part for that. I mean, then what on earth would it take? And even then, I mean, what about all of us? Whether it's me, you, our friends, family, our neighbors, other countries. I mean, heck, how many people die every day? How many rapes, murders? How many people starve? How many diseases? How many people are missing limbs? How many people are blind? How many people are deaf? All these people out there that are suffering, and it just, when I look at it from that perspective, it just feels hopeless. That I feel like no matter what happens, nobody's going to come to save any of us. That if something really bad were to happen, we're just screwed. And it's depressing. But maybe that's a nihilistic viewpoint. Maybe I'm just too isolated. Like I said, I haven't been able to hang out with any of my friends in like forever. I do get to talk to people at work sometimes, so a lot of times it's switched between being super isolated and not talking to talking a bit. And usually then, like I said, I don't think anybody at work can tell that I'm depressed. I do a very good job of trying to pretend I'm happy all the time. So, and no, I don't think anyone's ever heard me get angry. And I really don't cuss at all at work. I'm very controlled with what I say. Though occasionally someone's having a bad day themselves or something, I'll jokingly say a cuss word with the intention of making them laugh. And I'd say 90% of the time, it works. And I get a laugh out of them. And they smile. And I make them feel better. And it's just, that's something I do. And I know it doesn't make sense. But like a lot of times I'll feel like I just want to, like, there's no point to go on. There's no point to do anything. There's no point. Like, I'm just really upset about a lot of things. But I see somebody else feeling bad. I try my best to cheer them up, to make them laugh, make them smile. I mean, I'm still sad afterward, but at least they're happy. At least I was able to get a laugh out of them. You know, at least they feel a little better. And I mean, isn't that what's best? Just how you are. Like, isn't that the most important measure of your value as a person? Just, what you can do for others, how you make them feel better, make other people happy. But I should get back to this reading. I got distracted. I'm sorry. Where was I? Dark priests. Those who devote themselves to the infernal powers can also take the faith skill. However, their unholy symbols and dark blessings only affect supernaturally good creatures, such as angels, and they perform desecrations instead of purifications. The spirits of those buried on unholy ground can never find rest, and their corpses require half the normal power point cost rounded up to animate with the zombie power. Angelic weapons. Angelic weapons are created the same way as blessed weapons, except the process requires a full day and the vessel must always be purified before being blessed. The weapon must also contain a true holy relic, such as a fragment or bone of a saint, which is usually placed safely within the pommel. Obtaining such a relic should be an adventure in its own right. Only the virtuous can truly use an angelic weapon. The evil and corrupt can physically wield the weapon, but cannot tap into its celestial power. Those who are driven by sin, such as characters with arrogant, bloodthirsty, greedy, or other sin-based hindrances, or who have more than 2 marks of corruption, treat the weapon as if it were a mundane item. Other characters may utilize the weapon fully as long as they act in an honorable and righteous way. Each angelic weapon provides the same benefits as a blessed weapon, but also receives one of the following trappings chosen when it's first created. Cherubim. The rune of the all-seeing ones has been carved into the blade of this divine weapon, granting its owner the perfect vision to a range of 12 feet, or 24 yards. While this weapon is drawn, the wielder ignores all penalties due to darkness, illusions, invisibility, fog, and other forms of obscurement, although he cannot see through solid objects or penetrate mundane disguises. Elohim. This holy weapon bears a powerful sigil of judgment. The wielder is able to sense the corruption and evil in others, and inflicts +2 damage with this weapon to those who have become overwhelmed by sin, including supernaturally evil creatures, as well as anyone with more than 2 marks of corruption. Such foes also suffer a -2 penalty to soak any wounds caused by this weapon. Aralim. This celestial blade has been blessed by the valiant ones and grants its owner great courage. The bearer receives a +2 bonus to resist fear and intimidation, or becomes completely immune if he also has the brave edge. Hashmalim. The righteous weapon bears the mark of the glowing ones. It rumbles with thunder and flashes with lightning. Whenever it strikes a foe in combat, granting the +1 AP against metal armor and inflicting +2 damage. Those who are shaken or wounded by this weapon become partially deafened by the crash of thunder, suffering a -2 penalty to hearing-based notice rolls until they've recovered. Malakin. The symbol of the heavenly envoys has been etched onto this divine blade, granting its owner a special blessing. Whoever bears this weapon gains the ability to speak and understand all languages and receives a +2 bonus to notice rolls when attempting to spot a lie or deception. Alphanim. This holy blade has been blessed by the many-eyed one, who maintain the cosmic balance. Those who attack the wielder of this virtuous weapon subtract 2 from any gang-up bonuses that they would normally receive. Seraphim. This righteous weapon bears the mark of the burning ones, who maintain order through the purification of fire. When drawn, the blade automatically bursts into flame, providing the same illumination as a torch. It inflicts +2 damage in combat, and flammable targets must roll to see if they catch fire. Demonic weapons. Demonic weapons are created much like angelic weapons, but require a dark blessing to be placed upon a desecrated vessel, which must in turn contain a dark relic, such as a fragment of bone from an irredeemably evil person. This relic must come from a mortal rather than a demon, as it is important the person chose to embrace the darkness of their own free will. Unlike angelic weapons, anyone can use a demonic weapon, however, it will taint their soul over time. The owner of a demonic weapon must make a corruption check at the end of each game session, with a -2 penalty if they use the weapon or benefited from its abilities, and increase -4 if they actually use it to kill someone or commit some other evil act. Getting rid of the demonic weapon tends to be very difficult as they cannot easily be destroyed, and they have a habit of finding their way back to their owner. But should a player somehow manage to sever the spiritual bond they share with the weapon, they will immediately lose all the benefits it provides, as well as any other hindrances incurred through its use. Each demonic weapon provides the same benefits as an infernally blessed weapon, but also receives one of the following trappings, chosen when it's first created. Asmodeus. That's actually the rune of vengeance has been deeply etched into the blade of this vicious-looking weapon. Once per round, after being successfully hit in close combat, and after resolving the damage roll, the wielder may make a free fighting attack against her attacker with this weapon. If she is shaken, she must spend a Benny to remove the shaken status before she can make the free attack. The first time this ability is used, the wielder gains Vengeful as a major hindrance. Beelzebub. This cursed blade fills its owner with an insatiable appetite. The wielder gains the benefit of Liquid Courage Edge, except it applies whenever he eats or drinks to excess, and the benefits are double, +2 die, steps to vigor, and ignore 2 levels of wound modifiers. The wielder must draw a card at the end of each session in which he uses the ability. On clubs, he gains the Obese hindrance, even if he has Brawny. Belphegor. The glyph of the Disputer has been branded onto the hilt of this infernal weapon, and it seduces its wielder with the secrets of the ingenious inventions. The owner receives a free D6 in Weird Science, along with the Gadgeteer Edge, and each jury-rigged device she creates has 10 power points. However, she also finds herself taking shortcuts and ignoring precautions. Whenever the wielder fails any trait roll with a natural 1 on the trait die, she suffers some mishap that reflects her carelessness. Leviathan. The crossguard of this cruel blade bears the symbol of the Hellmouth, for the souls of those that it slays are cast screaming into the depths of hell. The wielder gains the Ugly hindrance, as her features take on a slightly reptilian appearance, but she also receives the aquatic ability, Lucifer. This beautiful gleaming weapon bears the symbol of the Shining One, and its blade glows brightly when drawn, providing the same illumination as a lantern. Attacks made with this weapon inflict 1 bonus die of damage for each raise on the attack roll, rather than just the first raise. However, the wielder receives the Arrogant hindrance the first time she benefits from this ability, Mammon. This kingly weapon is decorated with precious metals and has gems embedded in its hilt and pommel. The owner gains a free d6 in gambling and receives a +2 bonus to gambling rolls. It also becomes greedy as the major hindrance, and when fighting a foe who possesses something of obvious and significant value to him, the wielder enjoys a +1 bonus to his attack rolls with this weapon. Satan. This deadly weapon has been corrupted by the deceiver. The owner receives a free d6 in persuasion and gains a +2 bonus to charisma. However, he also suffers from the occasional bouts of uncontrollable rage, receiving vengeful as a major hindrance, and also gaining the berserk edge. If the weapon grants the wielder a skill, edge, or hindrance they already possess, ignore the duplicate in the case of skill, whichever is higher. Unconventional vessels. Most angelic and demonic vessels take the form of weapons, as this is a symbol of their role in the war between light and darkness. However, there's no reason why they cannot instead take the form of a shield, breastplate, or other object. In the case of protective items, the GM may wish to replace offensive bonuses with something more appropriate. For example, the Elohim breastplate may grant the wearer a bonus to armor and soak rolls against attacks from sinners, while the Seraphim shield could provide protection from fire. Other vessels usually receive the same bonuses as a weapon, but these can be adjusted to suit their physical form. For example, a golden ring of mana might provide its combat bonus to unarmed attacks, or perhaps its attacks made with a very expensive weapon. At the GM's discretion, certain fanatics might even turn themselves into weapons, tattooing or scarring their flesh as a sign of their devotion. Anyone profaning their flesh with infernal symbols should automatically receive the Devil's Mark hindrance. Hell-forged weapons. Weapons or armor forged in hell gain the Hell-forged trapping. And Hell-forged weapons can only be created in hell. Hell-forged trappings. Hell-forged weapons do regular damage to normal creatures, but when they use against a supernaturally good creature, they do an extra +4 damage. Additionally, they glow red hot. Each time the weapon hits, roll to light the target on fire. Each use a standard fire rules used in Savage Worlds. Armor with the Hellforged trapping is fireproof, and the wearer only suffers half damage from fire. Some of the most notorious Hellforged weapons include the Gauntlet of Hate, an oversized spiked gauntlet. This unique item grants a +2 bonus to any fighting roll relating to grappling. If the owner successfully grapples an opponent and then deals damage in subsequent rounds, the Gauntlet of Hate adds 2d12 to this damage. A foe incapacitated by this damage is immediately incinerated, and the owner's flesh underneath is stained black. The Nemesis Flail. Rare but not unique, these massive weapons have a large handle with 3 heavy chains and spiked-weighted cudgels at each end. It is weight 100. Hellforged and deals strength +d12 damage. Nemesis flails count as heavy weapons, with a reach of 4 inches and Nora Shield's parry and cover bonus. The Black Blade, a unique and famous artifact of hell. The Black Blade looks like an empty space in the outline of a long sword. It exists and is solid, but no light reflects from its surface. Any demons within sight of it gain an additional +2 to recover from being shaken. The Black Blade itself is Hellforged and deals strength +d10 damage with an AP 10. Any power with a light trapping must overcome the wielder's parry to hit it. Otherwise, the blade completely absorbs the effect. We'll actually hop into the Book of Law a little bit. Here is this. The Book of Law. In this chapter, you'll find a number of setting rules to help you deal with a variety of elements common to any game dealing with demons in hell. Corruption. They say the road to hell is paved with good intentions. People dedicated to the cause of good sometimes make the wrong choices, albeit for the right reasons. Politicians take bribe, all the while intending to use the money to write legislation help feed the poor, or somewhat ironically, tackle campaign reform. Religious organizations promote peace and goodwill toward all, but they become blinded in their righteousness and turn into cold hearted, intolerant people, all the while thinking they act in accordance with their faith. Vigilantes, they act in accordance with their faith. Vigilantes become the thing they hate, even as they try to cut the cancer of crime out of their city. We see these characters throughout fiction, television, and movie. The Shield, supernatural television shows are great examples of these themes. Vic Mackey, Shane Vendrell, and the rest of the strike team start out as good cops, but they start taking immoral shortcuts, which eventually lead to the strike team getting a rightfully deserved reputation as corrupt cops. The point is, they didn't start out that way. We also see this in Robert Jordan's epic Wheel of Time novels. The Children of Light are as bad as they come, but they commit their atrocities in service to light. To them, their cause is just and righteous. Similarly, the Aes Sedai manipulate kings and queens, claiming their reasons are for the good of the world, regardless of the pain and suffering their actions cause. Most certainly, there are individuals who simply want to do evil for the sake of evil. Alfred said in The Dark Knight, some people just want to watch the world burn. They commit evil acts for the sake of evil. There's no need to elaborate. All we know is evil when we see it. History and the present day is a repeat with examples of this type of behavior. The Codex Infernus introduces rules for corruption which not only track a character's journey to the dark side, but also track the hazards of becoming so good the character is just as iniquitous as her enemies. These rules are meant for more cerebral games where players and game masters want to tackle issues of morality and consequences of certain actions. Decisions. How far are you willing to go to achieve your goals? Is torturing someone acceptable? If you get vital intelligence about a terror plot, will you allow innocents to be killed if by doing so you can take out a drug dealer? Is it okay to plant evidence on a murderer you know committed the crime? Because if you don't, they'll get away with it. What about a village of orcs? Is it alright to kill the entire village just because they are orcs? Isn't that murder? How you answer those types of questions has an impact on your character. How others, especially other player characters, view her, and perhaps most importantly, how she views herself. We're not interested in imposing a set of morals upon your group. You need to determine what's good and evil mean in your game, and use the determination to decide whether a character has committed an act of evil or not. We're only concerned with telling you what comes next. You derive statistic willpower. Willpower is equal to 2 plus half your character's spirit and represents the hero's ability to resist temptation and corruption. Spirit exceeding D12 is calculated in the same way as a parry. Willpower is not affected by temporary changes to spirit attribute, but if spirit is permanently increased or decreased, then willpower must also be recalculated. Corruption effects. Whenever a character performs an evil act of their own free will, the GM should call for a corruption check, a spirit rule, with particularly callous and deliberate acts incurring a penalty. Intentionally murdering someone without cause, casual acts of random violence, physical torture, and so on usually apply a penalty of at least -2 to roll, with the most heinous and vile acts increasing the penalty to -4. If the character succeeds the corruption check, they feel guilt and remorse for what they've done, while on a failure they manage to justify their actions to themselves, gaining a mark of corruption. On a critical failure, they don't even care enough to try and explain away their actions and gain 2 marks of corruption. A character can never have more marks of corruption than they have willpower. The slippery slope. A common trope in many movies and novels is for the protagonist to take their first step in darkness with a small act and gradually move on to bigger and more gratuitously evil deeds throughout the story. A GM who wishes to see this sort of gradual descent may wish to place a limit on how quickly players can earn marks of corruption when committing evil acts. Perhaps a maximum of 1 mark per scene and or 2 marks per session, or even a max of 3 marks per rank. Unwanted attention. Characters who fail their corruption check with a natural 1 on the spirit die attract the interest of a demon, who hopes to further encourage their fall from grace. The player must choose one of the temptation abilities the first time this happens and gain the other ability the next time. Damned. Characters with as many marks of corruption as they have willpower suffer a +4 damage from cold iron weapons, are no longer affected by beneficial powers from the arcane background or miracles, and will automatically join the ranks of the defiled in hell when they die. They also permanently gain the Devil's Mark hindrance, which can never be removed, even if they later seek redemption. Temptation. Demons are attracted by evil acts and can see the potential for wickedness within a mortal soul. When the fate of that soul hangs in the balance, the demon will often try to tempt the individual in committing further acts of depravity. Temptation is represented by using two special abilities, Devil's Luck and Shoulder Devil. That reminds me, I still think it would be a great idea for a movie like I said, you don't ever make it clear which one's the angel, which one's the devil. You know, like in the cartoons, you have an angel and devil on people's shoulder telling them what to do. What if you had a movie where the protagonist went through the whole movie, and on one shoulder he had Ice-T, and the other shoulder he had Samuel L. Jackson, and you had Ice-T and Samuel L. Jackson telling you what to do? That would be a hilarious movie. Or what if you took Terminator 2, Arnold Schwarzenegger, and had him play Forrest Gump? Imagine Arnold Schwarzenegger like, "Get to the chopper, Lieutenant Dan!" Or saying Jenny, in the Arnold Schwarzenegger accent. Or Tom Hanks, being the Terminator. Now, I suppose we'd have to change a few more things, like we could replace the Liquid Terminator with Jim Carrey. I don't know. It'd be nice if Chris Farley was still alive. He was very hilarious. I imagine we'd have a lot more interesting movies. Him and Robin Williams. I wonder what Chris Farley and Robin Williams would think about, everything that's happening nowadays. Oh, by the way, the Mars rover recently landed on Mars. That's really awesome and interesting. Also, there's things in the news where they're talking about, I guess the Senate is supposed to vote at some point about decriminalizing marijuana, and also about basically banning the death penalty for the whole country. So, just interesting things that are going on politically that's... But yeah, the Mars rover thing, that's very interesting. When one of these abilities is given the hero marked corruption, the GM should try to narrate an unfortunate consequence of that action for someone else, such as a friend, ally, innocent bystander. Nothing in life is free, and someone must always pay the price for the hero's success. Devil's Luck. Gain 1 Devil's Benny at... For some reason, that just makes me think of Ben and Jerry's ice cream. At the beginning of each session, the Devil's Benny works exactly like a regular Benny, except that they can only be used for trait rolls, including soak rolls, but not corruption checks. If this roll fails, then the action is resolved as if it were actually a normal success, except it cannot be rerolled with further bennies, and the character automatically receives a mark of corruption. Oh, here's another picture. Shoulder Devil. Whenever the character makes a trait roll, they have the option of rolling a devil die along with the trait die and wild die. Always keep whichever die rolls the highest, but if this is the devil die, the character automatically gains a mark of corruption. Redemption. The road of redemption is a difficult one to follow, but there are a few who seek it out. The requirements will vary from character to character depending on their litany of past and present sins, and are always at the GM's discretion, but usually involve some of the following: completing a holy quest or spiritual journey, receiving a ritual blessing from a priest, such as a sacrament of penance, destroying a creature, object, or place of great evil, performing a noble act of selflessness or personal sacrifice, completing a good deed of great importance. If the GM feels the character has taken a significant step toward redemption during a game, they may allow them to remove 1 mark of corruption at the end of that session. Note that marks of corruption can never be removed at the end of a session in which temptation abilities are used, or during which the character has gained a new mark of corruption. Temptation abilities are never lost. Even if all the marks of corruption are eventually removed, the character will always feel the lure of the dark sense. And demons can be patient, and it only takes one moment of weakness or desperation for the character to stray from the path once more. I'd actually like to see alternative movies about one, what if Qui-Gon Jinn didn't die in The Phantom Menace? Or what if in Attack of the Clones, the Jedi were like, no, we're not going to use an army of clones as disposable cannon fodder. You know, maybe we shouldn't be waging a giant-ass war. What if Anakin, went and actually saved his mom, didn't kill anyone, or even if, like, when he went there to save his, like, she died, and then he, didn't kill all of them, and then went and talked to his master. What if he didn't chop off Mace Windu's hand? And just a continuation from there. Also, alternatively, what if when Luke first met Darth Vader, what if Luke, before he even got his hand chopped off, chose to join Darth Vader? Or what if Obi-Wan, back when Anakin turned to the dark side and Revenge of the Sith, what if Obi-Wan just joined Anakin? Or what if Darth Vader, when tasked with blowing up Alderaan with the Death Star, realized that billions of people are going to die, and then at that point he decides to actually tell Leia he can't do it, goes against the ship, and then he actually rescues Leia and escapes with her. And everyone's like, "Whoa, she's with Darth Vader." She's like, "No, he's on our side now. He saved me. He was tasked with destroying our whole world, and he wasn't willing to do it." Then, of course, there's, in the new trilogy, what if Luke didn't decide to try to kill, Ben Solo? And Ben Solo never had a reason to go to the dark side. What if Rey actually joined Ben when he said join her? When he said, "Hey, join me. You don't have to be alone anymore, Rey. Join me." What if Rey had actually joined him? Those would be interesting movies. Atonement. Sometimes the last step to redemption is the most difficult, with true absolution being little more than a pipe dream. Other times the difficulty is directly proportional to how far into evil the hero has descended, with minor sins being the easiest to forgive. GMs should adjust the challenge of the redemption task to whatever they feel is appropriate, depending on the needs of the story. Demonic pacts. History is rife with legends of people who have made pacts with the devil. Diabolus, Johann, George Foss, Urban Gandia, and other, of course, Robert Johnson are all reported to have sold their soul, some for fame, others for wealth, and some even for servitude. Recently, popular culture is rife with rumors of celebrities who have allegedly sold their souls in exchange for fame and fortune. Television series like Supernatural have plot lines and even entire seasons devoted to the repercussions of pacts with demons. But these are all just stories. There are no rules restricting what characters or people in the case of legends can obtain in exchange for their immortal soul. At least not in the real world. Role-playing games are different. Our characters are created using mathematical systems designed to balance a character's relative power and ability against the other characters. If a character chooses to enter into a pact with a demon, things become tricky. Because while we need to maintain balance, we have to recognize that selling one's soul is no trivial matter. Regardless of wealth or power that is gained from the pact, one fact is inescapable. The character is going to die. Like people of legend and pop culture, a player's character should gain something of significance. Otherwise, why do it at all? Furthermore, what are the repercussions? Simply saying you have sold your soul isn't enough. If that was the case, everyone would do it. The other shoe must drop, as it were. It's important for the game system and for the rules. The following rules provide a framework we use for demonic pacts in the game. By the way, the light novels for the Overlord series are very interesting to read. It's not fully finished yet. But I would say this. There's Slayers the Enemy, which came up as 3 seasons. Season 1 was, about Rezo the Red Priest, Shadow and Lena using the Giga Slave. And then the second season is more about Gob and Filbrizo. And the third season is about the Dark Dragons and like Guri's Sword of Light and the Star Eater person. And that's as far as the anime goes. Technically, there's a chapter, but originally all these started off as light novels. Though before all those, and of course they made a few movies, but there was also like a chapter 0, which was about a prequel before season 1, where Lena was traveling around Naga. So, which is a woman who likes to wear goth type outfits, bikinis, has really big tits, purple hair, and is Amelia's older sister. And while she's a spellcaster, just like Lena, she's not nearly as gifted, but she's very arrogant and believes herself to be better than Lena. And after a few times where she's a bit rude, Lena decides to ditch her ass. Now, there is a guy out there who goes by the name of, I believe, Florian, who does additional novels branching of his own fan fiction work. Now, there's Reflect, Chaos, and Rebirth as his main novels. It's a trilogy of novels. It's Reflect, Chaos, and Rebirth, which are just each a novel in their own right, which go on from the end of season 3, with Lena continuing to, use the Giga abilities, have stuff with Lord of Nightmares, and have, butterfly people, and it sounds more cool than what I make it sound like, but it's actually the most epic conclusion, and honestly, it's an amazing story. Now, he also did come up with 2 alternative novels. One called Dimerge, which takes it more of a, Lena becomes a supernatural deity, like in the terms of Greek mythology. But that's a belief-based entity that becomes off her while the real her decides to settle down in a shop as a family life of Guri, and they have a child named Penny. Which is an interesting story in its own right. And then there's Slayer's Virtual, which is the whole story is retold, where they retell season 1 of the anime, but they do it as a futuristic cyberpunk, where being a spellcaster is actually termed for hacking and using a sort of art, online, internet, nerve gear sort of style world, where spellcasting is computer hacking. But, it has the same, if not worse, possible problems like Sword Art Online, where, you're plugging your brain into a computer. I mean, something goes wrong, you can fry your own brain and kill yourself. But the main fanfictions, Reflection, Chaos, and Rebirth, are just amazing stories that would make incredible animes. I feel is what should be a true canon continuation and true ending to the series. Like I said, Dimerge and Virtual are just nice little fun tidbits, extras, but I don't feel are a proper story for it. But also I think are awesome and amazing reads. It's been a couple decades, but also I would say this. If you go on any website to try to read this, be careful. Because I haven't tried to read this stuff in like a decade or so. So one, I'm not even sure if it still exists. But also, you never know what viruses you might get. So be careful. Role-playing game. Dealing with the devil. Before she can even begin to make a deal with the demon, the player character needs to decide why she wants to sell her soul. The decision is important as it will affect the negotiation process. Next, the PC player character needs to find a demon capable of granting the player character what she wants. Not all demons are equal in ability. Lesser demons grant minor benefits. Greater demons grant great advantages, but only demon lords can give player characters anything she desires. Finally, a deal must be made, called the negotiation process. This is a social contract which is used to determine the final outcome of the pact. Need versus desire. People only deal with a demon for 2 basic reasons. They either want something, like immense wealth or political power, or they need something, a cure to save a dying loved one. evidence acquitting them of a murder, or escape from some other dire situation. As mentioned above, the underlying motivation has consequences. If the PC absolutely must make a deal with the demon, she is at a disadvantage. Put simply, the character is at the mercy of the demon. She suffers a -2 penalty to persuasion rolls during the negotiation process. Characters who simply want something have the demon at a disadvantage. Demons crave souls. One offered freely in exchange for something is considered too good to pass up, especially if we're talking about someone who's considered a hero, as most characters are. We see this reflected in television and comic books like Sam and Dean and John Constantine. People considered to be prized possessions among demon kind. Characters gain a +2 persuasion roll during the negotiation process. Finding your demon. The process of finding a demon capable of giving your character what she wants can be as simple as an investigation knowledge demonology or streetwise roll, or as complicated as a series of dangerous adventures centered on the goal of finding the demon. Alternatively, you might simply choose to use the interlude rules to handle the investigation process off screen and begin the next game session with the negotiation process. In my opinion, the best way to do is to use a combination of adventures to create the story and skill rolls to propel it forward as the character comes closer and closer to her goal. Characters make investigation or streetwise rolls. GMs choose which skill is most relevant, modified for the type of demon in question. If the character has a knowledge demonology skill, she can use that as well. There are generally two ways of going about the process: making contact with the demon, tracking the creature down, or summoning it. Hunting down a demon. Three skills: investigation, knowledge, and streetwise are all character needs to know to find out which demon she needs to find, and where to locate it, and who to talk to when she gets a general location. Everything else is just roleplay, and if necessary, combat. Now, there's stuff about pact results, like you tie, the bargain stands, you neither gain, because you can always try to renegotiate your pact. But, if you tie, bargain stands. Now, if you win by a 1 to 2, you gain an additional number of experience point equal to half your spirit die. If the demon wins, the bargain stands. Now, 3 to 4, if you win, you gain a number of experience equal to your spirit die. If the demon wins, you lose a number of experience points. Now, 5 plus, if you win, you gain experience point to your spirit die +1. Demon wins, you lose another number of experience equal to your spirit die. Furthermore, you've insulted the demon. You gain the wanted major hindrance. The only difference is the crime you committed is insulting the demon. Areas where the demon has been might currently be, or better yet, where it will be. The GM might provide this information in the form of internet articles, newspaper clippings, TV news reports about strange events that might indicate the presence of a demon, an abundance of crows, locust swarms, or a dramatic rise in homicides. This information will tell your character where to go. Once she's there, it's all about hitting the streets and talking to the right people to get the last details and tell her where this demon's located. That's where Streetwise comes into play. Of course, this all assumes you aren't already summoning a demon, just summoning it outright. Summoning a demon. If you are simply going to summon the demon, all you really need is the proper name of the demon and any special materials required for the ritual. Game masters can hand wave acquisition of the components for the ritual if they wish. There's no need to turn this into a treasure hunt after all, but a knowledge roll is always required to obtain the true name of the demon. Types of demons. Pick from the following three categories when determining what type of demon the character needs to deal with. As a rule of thumb, lesser demons are the most limited in power. Greater demons can do anything a lesser demon can, and a little more. Demon lords can grant anything. Lesser demons are, as the name implies, fairly weak in terms of power, often considered back alley ambulance chasers, capable of pulling out comparatively small things by those with real ability. For instance, the lesser demon who gave Robert Johnson the ability to play guitar really well. If you think about it, he didn't do all that much for him. With time and practice, Mr. Johnson might very well have accomplished that on his own. In fact, one could argue the legend of the Pact itself did more for Robert Johnson's fame than his musical ability, at least after he died. Few of his contemporaries even knew of the man. and his records didn't sell very well. It was only decades after his death when the musician began to realize how influential his work really was. That brings up one salient point, specifically is everything when it comes to making a deal with Demon. Robert Johnson never saw the true fame and fortune he hoped for in his lifetime, but the Demon technically upheld its part of the bargain, elevating him to legendary status post-mortem. Benefits. Lesser demons grant +2 advantages to the characters. These advances do not count as advances needed to rise in rank. Drawbacks. As with any demonic pact, the cost is your soul. Roll 1d8 and multiply it by 10, then add a number equal to your spirit die. You may not spend a penny. This is the number of XP you'll earn before the demon comes to collect your soul. This number can be modified depending on how well you do the negotiation process. Example, Lucas has 6 experience points and a d8 die. He rolls a 1d8 and gets a 4. He multiplies that number by 10, gets 40, and then adds 8 for 48 experience. This is the length of time Lucas has before he'll die and lose his soul. Greater demons are more exclusive, but have considerable ability. Most are known by a specific name, though it's likely isn't their true name. For instance, the demon who allegedly gave Faust his incredible knowledge and wealth is known as Mephistopheles. Whether or not that his name is simply contrivance on Marlowe Oguth is unknown, but the fact remains Mephistopheles is a powerful demon, capable of granting a wide range of benefits in exchange for a soul. Oh, by the way, if I would recommend 2 movies, I would definitely recommend watching Schindler's List and the movie The Odyssey, which, like I said, the movie The Odyssey, I think Arman Asimov, I can't pronounce his name, but about Odysseus and his journey. Absolutely amazing movie. Can't recommend enough. Benefit. A greater demon grants 3 advances to character. These advances do not count. Drawback. Greater demons aren't as generous with regards to the length of time you get to live in exchange for new abilities. So, yeah. Demon Lords. Demon Lords are so powerful they can grant tremendous abilities to those brave or foolish enough to seek them out. These creatures have so much influence and power, many speculate they are behind decisions that have changed the entire course of history. Demon Lords are known by many names. Even Lucifer himself. And they went through a bunch of names, and I really don't want to read them. But yeah, this benefit. 4 advances. Demon Lords don't bestow their power lightly. They want what's theirs, and they want it as soon as possible. Basically, it's just a much lower number before your character dies. It's like, hey, you get to play really well for a while, and then you don't get to play anymore. New character. Here's another picture. Demon Lords cannot be summoned. A character must actively search for them. As one of their agents, while the task shouldn't be too hard with regards to skill rolls, it can certainly be dangerous. Demon Lords don't use persuasion skill during the negotiation phase. They intimidate characters into accepting the bargain as is. Demon Lords have a D12 intimidation and enjoy +2 intimidation rolls in the negotiation process. Hey, we're talking about gods here. They shouldn't be pushovers. Prohibited pacts. For obvious reasons, characters may never gain immortality as part of a pact. Similarly, they may never gain a weapon or ability that allows them to kill the demon they're entering the pact with. That is just common sense. No demon in its right mind would ever agree to such a thing. Finally, a pact designed to immediately end an adventure or campaign is not allowed. Demon may give bits of information, breadcrumbs if you will, that aid the character in some way. This sort of information is equal to a single advance. Multiple pacts. A character may never have more than 1 pact at a time. The bargain. So you've found your demon. You have stated your desire, and all that's left is to negotiate the details, i.e., how much time you have left on this earth, or wherever your game is to do this. You enter in your social conflict with the demon. If the demon wins, you gain no additional time, as represented by experience points. You may actually lose time. If you win, you can add more time to the contract. Resolve the social contract as per the rules in the Savage Worlds rulebook, but use the results on the table above instead of just the existing one, and the guidelines for each type of demon as previously outlined. Death. Your character is going to die. She can't get out of it. If she kills the demon who holds her contract, 1 of 2 things can happen, depending on how you want the story to play out. Instant death. If the player ever kills the demon who holds the contract, the character dies on the spot. This is perhaps a hollow way of ending the character's career, but she knew how the story would end. Hunted. If the character kills the demon, the contract automatically shifts to another, more powerful demon. The good news is the character no longer has the devil marks hindrance, and she is temporarily free from detection from the new demon. However, she automatically gains the wanted major hindrance, as the new owner of the contract sets out to find her and bind the character to it. The hunted option adds more tension to the story and gives the character a glimmer of hope that she just might be able to find a way out of the pact. Obviously, this is false hope. Or is it? This is, after all, your game. You should feel free to change things if you feel that they make more sense to your story. Demonic possession. Demonic possession is a staple of supernatural horror. We see the theme reflected in movies, novels, and television, all of which are based on real-world myths. In the New Testament of the Bible, there are numerous accounts of demonic possession. Jesus Christ cast out demons from people on numerous occasions and commanded his disciples to do the same. Consequently, the Catholic Church has developed guidelines for determining whether or not a person is truly possessed, and methods to exorcise the demon from the individual. Buddhism also has guidelines for determining if a person is possessed, and more mundane ways of appeasing the spirit, which include acts of charity and taking sleeping pills and other medications. Shamanic cultures across the world also believe in possession, wherein vengeful spirits of animals or people may inhabit a person, causing all manner of disease. Some believe the possessed can cast out a vengeful spirit by appeasing it with sacrificial offerings. In a role-playing game, demonic possession tends to happen to NPCs rather than player characters, which is perfectly fine. Characters are, after all, heroes. More importantly, they are all extensions of the player. I don't know a single person who wants to have their character taken away from them. But here's the thing, demonic possession is only as scary if it's a danger to both PC and NPC alike. If we keep this sort of thing on the periphery, it loses its punch. Demonic possession becomes a thing that only ever happens to other people. There's no inherent danger in dealing with, say, strange artifacts or ancient tomes no person was ever meant to read. It is generally thought that the demon that gets exorcised goes straight back to hell, or whatever dimension it came from. That said, there are plenty of examples of body jumping, where a demon is cast out of one body or willingly leaves the host and goes in search of another body. Sometimes the protagonist is the vessel. The movie The Exorcist is a perfect example of this. At the end of the movie, the priest, Father Lancaster Marion, takes the demon into his own body to save Regan McNeil. At the end of season 5 of Supernatural, we see Sam taking Lucifer into his body and then jumping into the pit to save the world from the apocalypse. In Hellblazer #1 Hunger, John Constantine and Paul Bennett bind the demon up to Gary Lester, a heroin addict. While the later example is grim, consider that in the end, Gary Lester made the choice to become Manos Velas, knowing full well what the consequence of the choice would be. Quite heroic indeed. The choice gave Gary a shot at some kind of redemption for the part he played in releasing the Nuff into the world. Resisting demonic possession. Possession tends to happen in a couple of ways. A brute force onslaught against the host, or a slow attack which can take days to complete. The first instance tends to happen right after a successful exorcism, when the demon is disembodied but not cast back to hell. When a summoning goes horribly wrong, or even if a portal to another dimension unleashes ethereal spirits into the mortal realm. The best examples of these types of possession can be seen in the Supernatural television series and the Evil Dead movies. The second type of possession occurs when an individual comes into contact with an item of some sort. The item in question can be anything. Here's more pictures. Some examples include 30 pieces of silver possessed by the Order of the Blackened Marius in Dresden Files novels, or the Amulet of Pazuzu in The Exorcist. The rules for resisting possession do not change no matter how the character has come into contact with the demon. System. Possession is handled as a modified test of wills. The demon is trying to invade the character with its essence, and the character is resisting the onslaught with their own spirit. Instead of using a skill to attack the target, the demon makes an opposed roll using its spirit die, and the character resists with her spirit die. See magic items. If the demon wins, the character is possessed, as if the demon cast the puppet power. If the character wins, her mind remains free. The demon may only try to possess the character 3 times. If the character resists, she is immune to further attempts by that demon, though other demons may try to possess her in the future. The effects of the puppet power have the following modifications. The puppet power is permanent unless the demon is banished. Game masters should allow the player to control the actions of the character within the following caveat. If the GM determines the player is not playing her character as if she were possessed by a demon, then the GM may take control of the character. The character may make a spirit roll to temporarily take control of her body in situations where the demon possessing the character tries to do something the character would not do if she had control of her faculties. GMs, or game masters, or dungeon masters, if you will, use your best judgment here. Spirit rolls shouldn't be granted for trivial things, like, say, speaking rudely to someone, eating strange food, committing minor acts of violence against an adult, getting in a fist fight or pushing someone around, telling lies. If the character succeeds on spirit roll, she gains control for 1 round, plus an additional round for every raise. Once the allotted time has passed, the demon regains control of the host. The character also gains the possessed template. Possessed, a demon has taken over your body. Until it is banished, your character undergoes the following changes. The character's strength, smarts, and agility scores all raised by 1 die to a maximum of d12 plus 3, while her spirit die decreases by a single type to a minimum d4. The character gains the demon's weaknesses. The character gains all the demon's special abilities. Optional special ability, temporary damage immunity. If the game master chooses, she can rule that any normal damage the character takes while possessed is non-lethal and regenerates at a rate of 1 wound level per hour. If the character is ever rendered unconscious, she stays that way until she regenerates 1 wound. Now here's the scary part. If the demon is ever banished when it sustained wounds or incapacitated condition, the damage immediately becomes lethal and can't be regenerated outside of magical healing or normal recovery. This can potentially spell the end of a character, so please discuss it with your group before implementing it. Exorcism. There are 2 ways to exorcise a demon: banishment and brute force, and maybe even cardio. The simplest way is to use the Banish Entity power. Pinnacle Entertainment has kindly allowed us to reprint Power from the Horror Companion. Banish Entity. Banish Entity forces extra-dimensional entities back to their own realm. Generally, any entity that can be summoned can be banished. The cost to invoke this spell is equal to the entity's spirit die type, and double that if the entity is a wild card. A wild card demon with a spirit die of d10 therefore requires 20 power points to banish. Since most casters don't have many power points, they often rely on rituals or devices. The spellcaster must be within range of the target to make an arcane skill roll opposed by the entity's spirit. With a success, the entity is instantly driven back to its own realm, though it's not destroyed. On a failure, the entity is free to continue its business and suffers no ill effects. The caster is automatically fatigued from the effort, in addition to the backlash if it was rolled a 1 or any kind of the arcane skills. Reusing the same tape was probably not the best idea here. But Ah. Okay. Brute force. The second way to exercise a demon is we have the Norditrack bike and Chuck Norris. It's do so much damage to it that it temporarily becomes weak enough that the character can push the demon out of her body. Yeah. Brute force. I mean, we're going to use the power of Chuck Norris. The power of Chuck Norris compels you. The power of Chuck Norris compels you. It'd be like the exorcism, but instead of being a Catholic priest using holy water saying the power of Christ compels you, it would be a guy using nunchucks hitting the person saying the power of Chuck Norris compels you. I know it's a terrible joke. But come on, we got to have Chuck Norris jokes. The demon ever becomes incapacitated as a result of physical trauma. The possessed character can immediately make a spirit roll to push the demon out of his body at a +2 bonus. The demon's spirit roll is modified by its wound penalties. If the character succeeds, she exorcises the demon from her body. If you are using the temporary damage immunity rules, she immediately takes on all the wounds that she suffered. Now, hindrance table. A 2 is gain 1 level fatigue. 3 to 4 is combat shock minor. 5 to 6 cautious. 7 to 8 is mean. 9 to 10 is death wish minor. Jack is combat shock major. Queen is yellow. King is bloodthirsty. Ace is overconfident. And Joker is possessed. Hell changes a man. Even surviving the dangers of hell and escaping with your life is not enough. The after effects of visiting hell can be intense and long-lasting for those who brave the journey and make it out alive. Once the adrenaline fades and the wails of the damned stop ringing in the hero's ears, the silence sets in and magnifies all the horrific sights and experiences of hell. After the first night's sleep upon escaping hell, the hero has to make a spirit test before removing any fatigue penalties. If they succeed, they have survived hell unscathed. If they fail, they have been marked by their travels. Draw a card and check it against the hindrance table. If they roll a 1 on the spirit die and fail to roll, then draw 2 cards and apply the worst result. If a character gains the hindrance they already have, then apply the addiction major hindrance as they seek out drugs and alcohol to deal with the experience. They know you're here. The influence of hell has many effects, and even undead are altered by the touch of the infernal realm. All creatures encountered in hell with the undead monstrous ability gain additional ability. They can make smell-based notice rolls at +2 in order to sense any living creature within 500 feet. The undead need not consciously activate this ability, instead instinctively sniffing the air when in the presence of creatures that are still living. Here's some more pictures. The Book of Agaron. Codex Infernus, the Fall of Agaron, is a model of a fantasy world, designed to show you how the rules and concepts in this book can be applied in the game. We paint the world in broad strokes, focusing more on the points of conflict in the setting, and mapping out our vision of hell. Agaron is a large world, with many areas left to your imagination, giving you the flexibility you need to create new creatures, new races, and kingdoms. You can certainly play in this world if you wish. All the archetypes, races, monsters, and rules in this book are incorporated into the world of Agaron, or you can use it to help frame your own setting and even enhance your favorite published setting. In the beginning, all of creation was nothing more than vast, empty gulf. Then the weavers came, each possessors of the words of creation. With a shout, they unleashed the power of the words into the abyss, and Agaron was born. For countless millennia, the weavers watched the development of life in Agaron, at times guiding the evolution of strange and wondrous creatures. Most simple-minded beasts, lacking the ability to do more than follow their instincts. Other creatures were even smarter, though, even than they. Only proved intelligent in their ability to craft weapons of war or other crude tools to serve their needs. The weavers gave them names: the reclusive trolls, hideous wild Vard, who seemed to have left Agaron entirely, and a host of other names too numerous to mention. Most of these creatures, such as subterranean Grim, are filled with hate and malice. There were some, though, who developed higher intellects. Seeing vast potential for good in these beings, the Weavers made themselves known to these creatures, calling them humans. The Weavers taught humans to master fire, stonework, agriculture, hunting, and other methods of survival. The people of Acheron worshipped the Weavers as gods in the early days, bowing to them, bowing to the power and wisdom of the Weavers. In return, they were blessed, given boons ensuring plentiful harvests, good hunting, and prosperity for all. As a result, the peoples of the world flourished in the years commonly referred to as the First Epoch, migrating across much of Agron to establish the great nations Aradan, Erdun, Koth, Markan, Namaranth, Sagolia, Sundar, and Tygosh, though at a point, and even today, much of our world lay unexplored. The first Magi. The creation of Agron infused it with magical energies. The Weavers taught them the wisest of your ancestors, how to tap into them and manipulate the energy by using variations of the words of creations called spells and incantations. These magical formulae allowed us to perform great and dreadful works of wonder. Many marveled at our power, but even more were terrified of the things we could do, and rightly so. We, the first Magi, were like children playing with fire in those days, always pushing ourselves, testing the boundaries of what was possible with magic. And the Weavers, they tried to guide us as best they could, but there came a point when some began to dabble in darker aspects of magic, mind control, curses. They even engaged in necromancy and blood sacrifice in their quest for power. We demanded the Magi, now called sorcerers, stop their vile practices. When they didn't, we called a council, unanimously declaring them heretics. Their vile practices anathema. We went to arrest them, but found they had already spirited themselves away, fleeing through mysterious megaliths we now call the Stone Gates. The Stone Gates, none know who built them, or how, or even why they were created. We consulted the Weavers, but they wouldn't reveal anything to us to aid in our research. They warned us to leave them alone, that some things were better left a mystery. Of course, we didn't listen. Some lore masters believed the Stone Gates were an outgrowth of creation, magical protuberances, rising out of Agron itself like mountains or hills. Others believed they were created by the Weavers themselves, who used them to travel across the world. In any case, the megaliths had stood for centuries, mysteries we could only guess at, until Mathaxila Heartrender, leader of the renegade Kabbalah sorcerers, known as the Crooked Cross, activated them. At first we had no idea how Malthaxion had done it. We spent months examining the megaliths to no avail. Then one day we caught the mad sorceress Stragus Shadespell searching Malthaxion's old apartments. We questioned Stragus for months before he finally revealed his purpose. One of the Heartrender's most trusted agents, Stragus, was sent back to Raven's Rest, the now defiled home of our order, to obtain a book Malthaxion apparently left in his rush to escape arrest. We went back to Malthaxion's apartments, and while searching his library, we came upon a secret passage leading deep underneath the city. What we found down in that place still haunts me to this day. The codex infernus. Malthaxion possessed a predilection for the study of anatomy. Before he turned to the darkness, Malthaxion was a great healer, using his arcane talents to cure nearly any ailment. Only the most severe diseases and injuries escaped his healing touch. Perhaps that was what drew him from the light. The inability to defeat death itself. For what we found down in that place, the laboratory horrors nearly destroyed us. It seems the Heartrender lived up to the moniker. Abominable creatures, presumably guardians of the Malthaxian secrets, assaulted us. Pale, undead monstrosities, stitched together with baling wire, marked with strange sigils, burning lights in their eyes, those that had eyes at least, and gaping holes in their chests, lunged toward us. We managed to defeat them, but not after 3 of my order died. As the creatures tore them apart, it didn't take long to find the thing they were tasked to protect, a book bound with stitching, made from entrails, the pages flesh and the words written in blood. Now Thaxian even named it the Codex Infernus, the Book of the Inferno, or the Book of Hell, depending on the translation. Of course, we didn't know what he meant by inferno or hell, at least not at first, but we read page after page of instructions. Because in Evil Dead, we certainly learned that no harm can come from reading a book, right? Right? Right! Now, Thaxian believed the spirit left the body after death, traveling to a place called the Netherworld. He kept copious records of his attempts to access the Netherworld, sketches of his ritual circles, lists of components he used, animals he sacrificed, and which words of power he spoke. But the best spells either had no effect at all, or they had other, more disturbing results. One spell in particular summoned entities previously unheard of, the Defiled. According to his notes, Malthaxian spoke at length with these entities. He pledged fealty to them, and in return they taught him a great many things, including the method to open the stone gates and enter the Netherworld. We thought the megaliths were inscribed with words of power, and were right to an extent. The markings were the inverse of the words we were taught. Now Thaxian wrote down each sigil and its meaning, proper inflections when speaking them, how to incorporate them into spells, etc. The words of power formed a language of sorts, which we refer to as the Shadow Tongue. Now Thaxian used the Shadow Tongue to enter the Netherworld. The Grand Council. It seems we were right in our original speculations, that the stone gates could be used to travel throughout Agron, though we wondered why the weavers never spoke of them. We went to ask them why, but they were nowhere to be found. We formed a council to decide what to do. We summoned kings and queens from all across Agron to answer the question, should we risk using the Shadow Tongue to open the gates and hunt down the members of the Crooked Cross, or should we leave them alone? The council lasted weeks. Its members split into three factions, those who wanted to use the gates to explore Agron and hunt down the renegade sorcerers, those who insisted the gates should be kept closed, and another who advocated to do both, essentially prohibiting the general populace from using the stone gates until a select group could fully map out this netherworld and establish outposts in the unexplored regions of Agron. In the end, we decided to send teams to the netherworld to hunt down Mathaxian and other members of the Cabal. We had to know the danger we faced so we might prepare in the event these defiled came through. A new organization was formed, the Nether Guard, led by myself, my husband, Horladon the Doombringer, the tale of his naming will be told soon, and noble Galen Lightsworn, leader of the clan Draennan in the Cotaran Highlands. A group of 30 men and women opened the gate high in the hills, Raven's Rest, and stepped into the Netherworld. The Netherworld, upon entering the Netherworld, immediately understood how this strange twilight realm could be used to traverse Agron. The Netherworld appeared to mirror the world of the living. Though shrouded in a pale mist, paths led off in all directions, some disappearing into places where the mist was so thick it seemed impenetrable, and others along roads we recognized. After some discussion, we decided to head south, towards the stone gate outside the great city of Beggar's Bluff, in the borderlands. Between Sagaragole and Lumrad was normally a 10-day journey, took a single day by our reckoning. At some point, there were even simple structures, mostly lean-tos and fire pits, but as we approached a crossroads about halfway to Beggar's Bluff, there was a hut made from the bones of some creature we had never seen before, at least not in Agron. The place had an evil feel to it, so we passed without further investigation. Every junction of paths we came to along the ways was marked by a signpost with lanterns burning cold blue flame. There were glowing etchings on the lanterns, in the Shadow Tongue revealing names. Some of the places in our own world, others we had never heard of. Hell, the Dark and Wild, Purgatory, and the High Heavens were a few of the names that stood out. Paths led in the general direction of the places we knew, while the paths leading to other places invariably led into impenetrable mists and darkness, with one exception, the Dark and Wild. Surely there must be some place somewhere on Agron. Once we reached the stone gate at Beggar's Bluff, We opened the portal and stepped through. Galen sent a black bird back to Raven's Rest with a message describing the journey thus far. We stayed the night in the city and plotted our course for the next day. Galen wanted to continue on south through the mountains and down into Numeranth, and then head east to the Neversea to see if it were possible to find a way across. Haradan argued in favor of seeking out the place known as the Dark and Wild. Something wild burned in my husband's eyes as we sat in the common room of the Iron Fletcher Inn, a look I hadn't seen since we first met in the sea gate of the Amber Coast of Eldon. He was an exuberant warrior, yearning to see more of the world. I, a young lad, just beginning my studies in spellcraft. He convinced me to prolong my studies and come with him on his adventures. We traveled far and wide in those days, but eventually there came a time when my eagerness to see the world was overshadowed by my need to get back to my studies. Horadon agreed to come with me to Raven's Rest, and we were married. We found purpose, joining the Sentinels of the Sigil, the military arm of our order, men and women who swore to protect the Magi as they traveled throughout Agron. Still, as the years passed, I began to notice the fire I loved so much burning less bright. That is until we entered the Netherworld. After much debate, it was decided that Horadon would take 10 of the Netherguard on the path to the Dark and Wild, while the rest split up into teams of 2 or 3, each group following paths to places we knew. I was to make the way back to Raven's Rest and inform the council of our decision. The Dark and Wild. As the days passed, we heard from every party except Horadon's company. At first, we weren't overly worried. None had ever heard of the Dark and Wild before, so it was impossible to know how long the journey might take. Not to mention, we had no idea what they might find when they got there. Still, as the days wore on, I must confess my concern for my husband grew. 3 months passed with no communication, then one evening Horadon returned to Raven's Rest. My husband seemed haggard, worn down from his experience. His blood-stained clothes hung in tatters. Worse, though, was his physical appearance. His once smooth caramel skin was pale as snow. The veins in his emaciated body pulsed, black as obsidian, streaking across his chest, up and down his arms and legs. Even the veins in his neck and his face were discolored. I barely recognized. He glanced at me. Garon, is that you, my love? And he whispered, raggedly. I nodded, pulling him close to my chest, and then the screams began. For hours, Horadon rambled on and on and on about his time in the Dark and Wild, speaking of horrific creatures they found guarding the gate, creatures beyond description, who captured his team as they approached, taking them out of the Netherworld and into a temple complex at the center of a vast wilderness, which he referred to as the Black Heart Vale. There must have been others of our kind living there before the gate opened, for we encountered many humans, all slaves or worse, he said during a fleeting moment of lucidity. Our people are kept in pits, either used for food or twisted into forms mocking our own, bestial caricatures of their former selves in holy evil. We pressed him about Malthaxian and the renegade sorcerers, and Horadon confirmed our suspicions. Yes, I saw him there, he mumbled. Malthaxian and his order are in league with the other creatures who dwell there too. He calls them defiled, damnable things that come from a place called hell. He looked at me. You remember the signpost, yes? I nodded in understanding. Hell was one of the many places written on the signpost. That's where they come from. He gasped, wild eyes staring at something that only he could see. It was obvious that my husband was struggling against something. Some of us sensed another presence assaulting his mind, attempting to dominate it. His speech became erratic. At times he spoke in a guttural language none could understand. He thrashed on the floor, staring at us, babbling incomprehensible gibberish. We tried to chain Horadon to a wall, but... Oh, here's another picture. It might be hard to see. It's like a night skylight. He just laughed and ripped the links from the wall as if they were twigs. We are coming, he hissed, and then escaped, killing 14 sentinels before fleeing through the stone gate. The next time I saw my husband was Corin's Wall, the gate to the plains of Arden, where the defiled and their hellish scourge threw us back and scattered our armies to the wind. He served directly under Malthaxion, now head of the Dread of Morgan, an elite group of sorcerers who proved themselves more powerful than the rest of the Crooked Cross and found favors of the eyes of the defiled, becoming transformed into beings wielding incredible power. This here. There we go. Agron's Doom. Hordon Doombringers. Doombringer was the name he was given after he fled Raven's Rest. Prediction proved true. We sent out a call for an emergency council with all the Magi and leaders of the kingdom. The summons went out across Agron, but only a handful of our order came, each with dark tidings. The gates were open, they said, and they can't be closed. We rushed to the stone gate outside Raven's Rest, only to find strange beasts pouring through. Indeed, if what we had found at the stone gate was any indication, then countless horrors must be pouring through the stone gates, using them to assault the cities of men. Try as we might, we couldn't shut the gate. The sigils had changed, now burning fiery red and indecipherable. Many of the order died that day, as did the sentinels of the sigil. We were forced to flee Raven's Rest, riding south throughout the borderlands and then southwest along the great sandy river until it emptied into treacherous, troll-infested swamps and Sananea, only to find the defiled had taken control of Zargal, the nation's filthy capital. As loathsome as the place was, I couldn't help but mourn the loss of the people who once lived there. For a while, at least, it was only until much later that I found that King of Tiberium, Thorgan, swore fealty to the defiled, committing the resources of the nation to their cause in exchange for lordship and a place of honor in hell. Nearly the entire populace followed willingly, branding themselves with Tiberian's mark, a rooster's foot dripping with blood. For months our travels had the same result. Once mighty cities fallen to the invaders, villages burned, slaves taken, mutilated bodies everywhere. We hid in caves, deep forgotten hollows, in remote forests, wherever we could, praying to the weavers for aid, with no response. What was that? When we came to the Kotaran Highlands, however, we found Galen Lightsworn had amassed an army and was preparing to sweep east throughout the Highlands and retake Kara Haran, the largest stronghold in Kotara, and Galen's home city. Thousands of men and women flocked to his banner, a white fist set against a golden sunburst. Praise the sun, right, guys? Dark Souls reference. Seeking vengeance for the atrocities committed against their kins. Words spread across Agron. Assisted by sentinels of the sigil, brave souls went into the netherworld, using smaller stone gates to enter remote areas and rally pockets of resistance. After months of preparation, we went on the offensive, bringing the fight to the hellish horde. For a while, it seemed we were succeeding, but it would not last. We managed small victories, capturing a village here and there, a small city there. But with each step forward, we were hurled back too. The final hammer stroke came at Corin's Wall, where the ragged and battle-worn faces of light gathered in one last battle against the scourge in the mountain pass. Led by Morrigan, the defiled, some of us began to call them demons, ravaged our positions. Monstrosities the size of a tall tower attacked the wall itself, tearing massive holes. The horde poured through. Malthaxion and Hordon slew Galen Lightsword, and we broke, fleeing the onslaught by whatever means we could find. The group and I fled higher into the Smoky Mountains. hoping to escape by the roads which were northbound. But then the world shattered. As we fled Malthaxian's forces, a burning rock larger than anything I'd ever seen sped across the sky, diving down toward the horizon, followed by a loud crack of thunder. A great earthquake shook the land, and the fire rained down as far as the eye could see, which wasn't far. The sky grew black as dust launched into the heavens, obfuscating, obfus, obfuscating the sun. Our horses bucked in terror, and we were flung to the still shaking ground. The last thing I saw before losing consciousness was a wave of fire rushing up the mountain toward me. The aftermath. Some say it was the Weavers who broke Agron, judging humanity for our sins against the world they created, while others claim the defiled did. A growing number of people blame those of us who study the arcane arts for the devastation. I can't say they are wrong. Yes, it was Malthaxian who opened the gates and made contact with demons and brought hell to our world. But the blame for that really lies with all magi. We should have left well enough alone. The Weavers kept that knowledge of the stone gates a secret for a reason. Even so, it's not so far-fetched to believe that someone would eventually have opened the gates and brought doom to the world. It was just a matter of time, because in our arrogance, we felt we could master anything. So when I hear those of our order are being hunted and slain, I can't help but think we've got it coming. But by my reckoning, it's been 10 years since the world shattered. In the first 2 years following the breaking, as we now refer to it, thousands died of starvation and exposure to the elements. During the worst winter I've ever seen, war continued, although not so much against the demonic horde as with ourselves. You see, the landscape itself changed. New oceans have risen up, swallowing old territory and creating new lands. Some are recognizing as fragments of old kingdoms, while others, such as the Dark Wild and Koth, are yet to be fully explored. The upheaval has thrown everything into chaos. There have been attempts to rebuild some of the old kingdoms. Men and women have come forth, claiming the right to rule, while others have taken control of large swaths of territory, carving out their own fledgling kingdoms. These developments have led to bloody conflicts across Agron as rightful claimants to the throne challenge the would-be rulers. Travel throughout these regions has become dangerous. Seeking to build armies, warlords from all parts of the world conscript people into their ranks, often at sword point, using most as shock troops or servants. Of course, there aren't only dangers to survivors to contend with. All of the stone gates I've encountered in my travels are still open. Demons, more commonly known as the Defiled, still walk Agron, though their numbers have greatly diminished. At first, I could not understand why Agron was completely overrun by the hordes of hell in those early years, but then we managed to capture one in Morgan, Selena Thorn Weaver. Selena shuddered as she spoke at length about a war in hell. The king of hell has been slain. Someone or something managed to get into the mute citadel, steal past the doom speakers, and slay dread Lord Thymox in his throne room. Selena's hands shook, gripping the chains attached to her manacles. All is chaos. The entire realm is on the verge of hostilities. Furio, Phaegian, Slog, and even Dis itself prepare for the inevitable war of succession as the Overfiends maneuver their forces. I assumed those strange names were regions in hell. I fled to avoid the Inquisition. Oh, here's a map of Agron. There you go. But yeah, blame the Morrigan, she said. They hunt us at the behest of the Doomspeakers, who claim we used our influence with Thymox to gain entrance to the Mute Citadel and assassinate him. She shook her head. Lies, spread by those jealous of our station. Selena's voice rose a shrieking wail as she struggled against her bindings. How long has it been since Agron broke, she asked. Her eyes grew wide when I told her. 10 years, she gasped, shaking her head. That long? It's only been perhaps a year in hell. Time is strange in the realms bordering the netherworld, and there are many of these places, entire worlds filled with people, and things that make the demons of hell seem as harmless as a child's plaything. She paused, licking her lips. They know of Agron. Some have already come through the gates. She looked at me, a strange, hungry look in her eyes. Do you have the codex? We know it was one at a time in Raven's Rest. Of course we have searched. We did capture your home after all. She grinned wickedly. We sent an entire town to retrieve it. She looked at me, lips curled in a sneer. Hordon gave the order himself. Overcome with rage, I lunged toward the Morgrim and would have strangled the woman, but the guards pulled me back. I stormed out of the interrogation chamber, her cold laughter mocking me as I went. An uncertain future. Selena's revelations of hell are both a blessing and a dire omen. This assassination and impending war in hell seems to have staved off our destruction, but who knows how long that will last. If what Selena said is true, time seems to work in our favor. Perhaps we can rebuild our world and prepare for the next surge of demons and other horrors the sorcerers hinted at before this world. Maybe we might even close those damnable gates forever. The loss of the Codex worries me greatly. It was lost when we fled Raven's Rest all those years ago. We thought the horrors which attacked Raven's Rest had carried off. Apparently we were wrong. Still there is hope yet to be found. Hope for a better world. Garon, Shadow Slayer, Lord Commander of the Netherguard. Agron. In the decades since Agron broke, I have taken upon myself to gather as much information about our world as I could. Though, truth be told, to fully catalog Agron, its people, and the struggles they face would require more time and space than is currently possible. What follows are memos and letters, some found on the dead messengers of the enemy, others from our people. Individually, they provide a glimpse in each region of the world. Collectively, they offer great insight into the scope of the challenges we face. Garen Shadowslayer, Lord Commander of the Netherguard. Eridon. Delver's address at Havoc's Hope. Welcome to Shadow's Rise, the highest point of Rogan's Hill, and to Havoc's Hope, the tavern at the breaking of the world. Please make yourself comfortable and pull up a chair. Throw aside your troubles and another log on the fire, for the nights come early now, and there is a chill in the air. Outside, storm clouds gather, but here, for tonight at least, you are safe. Judging by your demeanor and garb, you are gathered to listen to my tales, and not to sample the innkeeper, Freydale's mutton stew. I admit the mutton is an acquired taste, but in the days ahead, you should wish such a feast be laid before you. You know who I am, or you would not be here. But let me introduce myself all the same, for it keeps my thoughts in order. I am Hygrin Blackcrow of Caucasia. The tales you have heard for the most part are true. I fought at the side of Galen Lightsworn, and I fell within the Corn's wall, yet enough life was left in me to witness the breaking of the world. Only the crush of broken corpses saved me from the cleansing fire that swept man and demon before it. How I survived, beyond that, is anyone's guess. I do not do anyone a dishonor when I say Aradon was the greatest of all Agron's nations. Alas, the greatest gems always plucked first, and the cities of Aradon fell first to the countless defiled who came for the slaughter, before the breaking of the world, and while the people of the other nations warred each other. Aradon was a nation at peace with itself. As a well-traveled merchant, I knew Aradon's 12 ruling city-states as if I had been born in each. Those outside of Aradon looked to the breaking of the world, cursed it, and named its instrument of destruction Havoc. Yet those of us on Corn's Wall recognized it for what it was. Hope. Your sideways glances tell me you think you sit before a madman? Yes, I have seen things that would test the sanity of any man, but please indulge me a little further. Not one of you hails from Aradon. If you did, you would already be dead. You've come to Havoc's hope, seeking riches, seeking answers. But you must first know the truth. At the breaking of the world, Eridan had already ceased to exist. Those that were butchered in the initial assault were the lucky ones. After the bloodlust of the defiled had sated, the survivors were led through the gates in their hundreds of thousands, never seen or heard from again. Those that made their last stand at Corn's Wall had already broken when Havoc blazed a trail across the sky. Eridan's cities may have been destroyed and the earth cauterized, but it was the defiled that who burned that day in Eridan. Their numbers were legion, and they were ready to march across all of Agron and end any resistance that remained. If not for Havoc's cleansing fire, nothing of Agron would remain, not even hope itself. I will tell you more of hope, but first I will tell you what remains of Eridan. In the farthest reaches of Eridan's northeast, at the base of the Smoky Mountains, is the city of Tyrus. Of all Eridan's cities, Tyrus remains the most intact. Not only was it the most distant from the impact, but it had the shelter of the foothills which it was situated. Still, most of Tyrus burned, and its buildings have collapsed or remain burnt out husks. The defiled had left the city before it burned, and bereft of its population. There were none to mourn its passing. Life has, however, returned to Tyrus, as refugees from all across Eridan and beyond have made it their home. Still, it is a dangerous place, for while the defiled have so far left it in peace, man is not content unless he is oppressing his own kind. Tread there carefully, for some that choose to make home their due for secret reasons. Situated on the open plains, the rest of Ardon's cities were not so lucky and bore the full brunt of Havoc's judgment. Tyrus's twin city, Kranios, lies in ruins at the south of Eridan, shattered by the blast and split in two halves. The great canyon that swallowed the Steel Snake River, parting it further than the span of any known bridge. The southern half of Kranios lies lifeless, other than what the wandering creatures may have laired in its ruins. The northern half occupied by small war bands of the defiled, whose allegiance is now their own, their lord in hell disposed. The Steel Snake River begins its journey high in the Smoky Mountains as a meltwater spring fed by tributaries. It gathers strength as it plunges through a series of waterfalls until it reaches the plains of Eridan. Here it flows, unmolested before splitting at Bodkin's Point and vanishing over the precipice known as Reason's Edge. Inside the canyon, noise is deafening, even the loudest shout drowned out by the pounding torrent. For mile after mile of uncharted river continues through over sharp-pointed rocks, sometimes diverging through an unexplored cave system before rejoining the main body of water again. The water is then slow, becoming a series of unfathomably deep lakes before leaving the canyon and flowing unimpeded until the spilling over the great cleft at Thunder Falls and in Segalia, where it travels to the burning sea at Scar Point. West, northwest of Thunder Falls is what remains of the city of Zarathian. Zarathian is a terrible place to behold. Only its tallest, strongest buildings have survived, and all else has been laid low. Still, buried under several feet of fine ash and pumice over the years, The wind and rain have eroded the ash in places to reveal the blackened tops of the statues that the city was once renowned for. Not all are statues, however, but the carbonized meat and bone of both citizens and defiled alike, who were baked alive by the burning ash. Each and every one of them is frozen in time, blackened and contorted in pain. That is not the worst of it by far. At night, the eyes of the dead glow a baleful red, as if something terrible possesses them. Yet, frozen in place, they seem unable to move. I spent one night there, but one night there, terrified out of my wits, and while I could see no sign of life, the next morning, footprints crisscrossed the soft ash where they had been none the day before. While the city's treasure awaits the brave and foolish alike, I would suggest the dead city be left in peace. To the northwest of Zerathine is Arden's most westerly city, Gyros, once the breadbasket of Agon, and now lies in ruins. Not only did Gyros burn, but it suffered from a terrible bombardment of massive rocks hurled into the air by Havoc's impact. Throughout the city, these rocks lie where they fell from the sky hundreds of miles from their origin. Some rest at the bottom of large holes they punched straight through the city's foundations. Others have plowed through entire neighborhoods, leaving deep trenches in their wake, large mounds of earth and rubble marking where they came to rest. Northeast of Gyros is the city of Harakoven, a city that suffered an unusual fate, and yet what remains is an amazing sight to behold. Havoc's impact sent a shockwave across Erin and beyond, lifting and splitting the earth as it went. As Harakoven, the entire low-lying mesa the city was built upon, buckled violently, thrust up on the eastern edge, and plunging it into the earth on the western edge. The city, the entire city, was left hanging at a precarious angle. The upending of Harkoven sent the tallest buildings tumbling, causing an avalanche of debris, crashing through the city, destroying large swaths of it. The angle of the uplift, however, spared Harkoven from the approaching wall of fire, and very little what remains intact shows any sign of fire damage. With the city abandoned, the new town of Longshadow has sprung up at the edge of the crescent-shaped lake that has since formed, filling the crevasse of the western tip of the old city plunged into. The town is small and centered on a cluster of small stone buildings that had been a natural outgrowth of Harkoven beyond the mesa. The eastern edge of the old city is now the highest point of the plains of Aradan. Despite the violence and sheer forces involved in the destruction of Harkoven, more of Aradan's people survived there than anywhere else. To the east of Harkoven is the city of Gossamer. Much of Gossamer was spread out, built in, on, and above a series of shallow, natural wind-worn canyons cut into the plains of Aradan. There is a precious little evidence remaining that any city stood above ground. The further into the canyon one travels, the more that survives. Unfortunately, the city is the domain of the defiled, for one of the accursed gates is located nearby. Gossamer is a city of slaves, the defiled, the masters. When I talk of slaves, I talk not of humans. Yes, there are large numbers of Eradan's people, unfortunate to have been captured by the hunting packs of the defiled, but there are others too. There are great beasts of burden I have never heard tale of, unusual crab-like creatures whose functions I could not even determine, great bridled worms that haul ore from a nearby mine, and creatures we know as grim, vicious, hate-filled fiends. I think they might also be sick, All of them have a pale, jaundiced complexion. They eagerly scurry about Gossamer, doing their newfound master's bidding. I also saw large ant-like creatures that spent the daylight. Not the greatest picture, but have a look at there. It's still cool. I think it's an amazing picture, but I know the quality of me showing this to you via the laptop, you probably can't see shit. Hours swarming over the outcroppings of ropes at top of Gossamer's canyons, slowly, steadily building a series of bridges to allow travel across the canyon tops. Given the level of destruction Havoc visited on the 6 outer cities, it's unsurprising when I tell you that the inner cities, for the most part, have been blasted from the face of existence. Of Caicos, of Phrygia, Herenicus, of Amerinus, I could find no sign of them in travels. Burned from the face of Agron, or swallowed by the earth, I could not tell. Athenia, I found its location. How much of the city remains, I could not say. It appears to have been consumed by pillars of hot black rock that are still warm to the touch these many years later. Tonight, inclined shadows rise, aided only by the light of the moon. At daybreak, from the doors of Havoc's Hope, you will witness what has become of Aradan's first city. Until then, I will tell you its fate, for to witness what is left, to have your soul seated with despair, despite its terrible beauty and the stunning view. As Galen Lightsworth fell, the great fire named Havoc appeared in the sky, crashing to the ground at a terrible speed. If this was the intervention of the Weavers, the Magi, or cosmic coincidence, we shall never know. As you shall see, it struck the very heart of Agros, and the resulting impact fell all across Agaron, and the city of Agaros was vaporized. No other word does it justice. Yet, despite all, the old palace still stands at the edge of Havoc's wrath. The great hole it left when it pierced the heart of our world. Havoc's wrath is as beautiful as it is terrible. The crater is 4 miles wide, its depth unfathomable. The strata of underlying rock are laid bare, millions of years of creation exposed. Everywhere there are openings, fissures bubble with hot liquids, which give off curiously colored gases which stain the rock. The deeper you go, the warmer it gets, and the sides become slick with obsidian. Still it goes down, further and further. At a certain point, you reach the scald, a layer of swirling purple and green vapor that dissolves the flesh on the slightest contact. The scald rarely moves. Only occasionally does a gust of wind break the still, piercing the veil and offering a brief glance of what may lie beneath. The defiled have been obsessed with exploring Havoc's wrath, looking for caves to bypass the scald, or building curious contraptions to pass through it. Like you, they seek answers, but they wish to know if the largest gate in Avron survived Havoc's wrath. For the gate was once a great marvel, a wonder of Agaron that stood in the very center of its greatest city. What you may find at the bottom of Havoc's wrath, I cannot say. Many will find death, but dig deep and you will find hope. Do not underestimate the power of hope, my friends. Hope can be as elusive as the wind, yet you just need to summon it. I have found hope. Here is a piece, a small piece of what fell from the sky, or perhaps what was dug from the earth. It is a metal of some kind, harder than the finest steel, heavier than twice its size in gold. This is the hope I talked about. This is the hope I can hold. I call it Demon's Bane, for one touch is lethal to the defile. I carry with me the sword of Galen Lightsworn. Its edges tempered with hope. Hygrin Blackcrow, hope bringer of Caucasus-Sneer. Eldun, to Dreadmaster Blackfist, Overfiend, and rightful First Lord of Agron. Dreadmaster, I have taken the unusual step of entrusting my report to a courier vessel rather than deliver it to you myself in person. I trust you will savor the flesh of the possessed human, for it is sweet and tenderized by long hours of torment, required to shatter the soul and gain possession. It is unclear how much time had passed since I left to investigate the portal the humans of Agron refer to as the Zythinal Gate. The measure of the passage of time is not normally something of note to our kind, but here in Agron, one almost feels compelled to mark its passing. The changes wrought by time's swift passage are powerful, and should we take our eyes from the mark, it could prove costly. Although the tide of chaos still rages across Agron, it slowly begins to recede, its pace quickening with each blink of the eye. At first glance, the humans seem not unlike our kind. 1,000 conflicts rage across Agron as they fight for power and dominance in the wake of war and cataclysm. Nevertheless, a semblance of order has taken root. Indulge me as I explain. The ancient power base of the territory marked in the human's map as Eridun is the city of Zythinia, from whence the gate gains its name. Despite being ancient in comparison, my previous comments on the passage of time suggested nothing here is static, and the city of Zythinia now is a sunken ruin that has taken the portal with it. The Weavers, the human believe, created their world, and the Weavers, they believe, ultimately destroyed it. It seems odd, standing as what now called Weaver's Hill, what's the Mesa Zythinia on which the city stood. The cataclysm caused the Mesa to buckle and sink in the middle, pulling most of the city into a great rigged depression in the earth. The rock strata that once defined the mesa is now contorted, buckled, and folded, seemingly twisted and woven, surely only by the power a creator can wield. The folding of the strata has left 1,000 rents in the rock, angular caves that run for miles, some deep in the earth, others in the Great Depression, where the ruins of Zythinia now wallows, semi-submerged in algae thickened water. Drink me some water, pretty good. Somewhere in this maze of angular caves along the edge of the old city lies the Finial Gate. The gate is fully operational, my lord, yet our expeditionary forces became lost in the cave system. Rife with hunger, they turned on their scourge lords, feasting on them before turning on one another. Those that made it to the city met their end, running afoul of the defile that preceded them a decade before. Now masterless and calling the ruins their home, they give no quarter to those found trespassing. I have discovered those of our forces that maintained discipline and navigated a route out of the mesa were joined in battle and destroyed by the forces of Stravik the Brand-Bearer, the human war chief of the risen city Valandar. Valandar, the very word of the human tongue, causes a weakening. A tremor, a moment of indecision. Could this be what the humans call fear? It's a word that feels primal, something ancient, burnt in the very being of our kind. A warning. Not wishing to tread there, I used the senses of the possessed courier, burying this report. Oddly, I was able to extract more from the humans by walking among their number than from all the limb-rending and pain I've inflicted upon those I've captured and interrogated. The city of Zythinia is gradually sinking deeper into the mesa, while the ruined city of Valandar rises out of the sea as if in counterbalance. It is here that Stravik the Brand-Bearer has. And here's some more pictures. Brought order to the southern region of Erdun. The shifting rock that lifts Valandar from the sea generates such heat that great clouds of steam belch from a series of great fissures in the ground around the city. When the air is cool and the winds are light, which is much of the time, a thick fog hangs heavy in the air. It is for this reason the human flotsam that inhabit the city mostly refer to their home as the Great Haze, rather than using its true name. The courier proved to be a knowledgeable guide, allowing me to see much of the city in great detail. The streets are slick with moisture much of the time, and perpetually smell of pitch and sulfur, which was most agreeable to my senses. Only the hardiest of plants seem to grow within the city, and the bulk of food produced to feed the population comes from a series of farmed islands several miles offshore. I believe this to be the city's greatest weakness. Until such times that its defenders can make safe the land beyond the immediate reach of the Great Haze, I humbly suggest you consider sending the Imperator Mazaroff's fleet to capture these islands. Such a coup might break the spirit of Valandar's people. Defense of the city is not taken lightly. To the rear is a cliff of wall of jagged rocks, broken only by the black walled harbor that now rises from the sea with the rest of the city. All else is protected by a new and formidable semicircular wall placed well beyond the shifting earth. At the center of this wall is a great tower and a gatehouse, the tower so tall that it alone can be seen above the gathered fog from a great distance. At night a great light shines like a beacon of defiance, and my body aches to punish them for their hubris. And beyond the walls, and complementing the great light, are a series of unmanned beacons. So bright are the beacons that they cause the fog to glow. Any creature that moves between them, the beacon's wall is easily spied, its elongated shadow giving away its position. With the exception of their mewling pups, everyone in the city is armed and trained. Barring those who have not yet made it through their combat training, those that cannot defend the city are shipped to the islands, where they are worked as slaves, spending their days tending the crops to feed the city. No easy task, for I estimate the population numbered in excess of 100,000 souls. Food from the islands arrives from a merchant ship in the Black Harbor, the only real access point to the burning sea from within the city. The burning sea is so called because of the large upwelling of heated water, giving the impression of smoke continually rising from it. Just beyond the mouth of the Black Harbor is a phenomenon known as the Seven Sisters, a series of immense geysers that erupts hundreds of feet into the air, causing the very earth to tremor and creating a curtain of boiling water and scalding steam. There is enough power to sink a fleet of ships. Stravik is rumored to have somehow harnessed it. Indeed, it might prove dangerous for Mazarov to bring his fleet close to the Black Harbor, but the Imperator is cunning, and I fear he grows bored with his present situation in Marcon. I've heard rumors that he plans to sail south to Koth, something you had forbidden. Stravik may have created an oasis in order that the maelstrom of chaos that is Orden, but that order does not stray. But more than a few miles beyond the city walls, corsairs of unrivaled savagery ply their brutal, glorious trade along Reaver's Run, a 200-mile stretch of coastline, defined by unyielding cliffs and jagged rocks. The leader of these corsairs, Vaimar Blackvein, commands his crew from the former Algun's navy ship, the Crimson Storm. It may be worth noting the circulating rumors describing those under the command of Captain Blackvein as having a number of the defiled among the ranks. Beyond the Great Haze, all that remains is a wall-torn land of ruined cities, razed villages, and fortified towns, where humanity's scratches out a living. while self-appointed lords rule over them with an iron fist, wasting their diminishing resources waging war with their neighbors. Still, there is more worthy of note here than there might see at first. In the mid reaches of Erdun, the barbarian tribes from Tygosh have fought their way through the breach in Corin's wall and driven through the plains of Eridan, steadily plunder their way westward. I believe their goal is to reach the coast and attempt to reclaim the lands they believe their natural birthright. Curiously, the barbarians have divided their forces and stopped to occupy the ruined city of Settlers Rock. Settlers Rock was one of the last of Agron's cities to fall, due to its remote location in the foothills of the Grimviane Mount Grimviane Mountains. With almost no strategic value, it makes no sense that the barbarians, being nomadic in nature, would stop to occupy the city. Yet occupied the city they have and enslaved its population. The truly strange and equally interesting part is that the barbarians have begun to dismantle the city. Yes, dismantling, not destroying. They are taking the city's part, stone by stone, and transporting it northward. For what purpose, I cannot fathom. At the northern most point of the shattered nation of Erdun, deep in the Gribian Mountains, lies the most unassuming town of Bloody Bridge. This border town lies in a high valley pass that guards the fertile pastures and farmland that gently sweeps for 100 miles to the sea. Before the fall of Agron, this town was the focus of constant tension and occasional conflict between the nations of Eridan, Urdan, and Kotara, each of which makes claim over such a territory. Even today, petty warlords that spent the remains of their respective nations continue to squabble over the small town and its territory for no other reason than bloody pride. Constant warring and fertile land is not what makes Bloody Bridge of interest, however. In a crevasse in the bluff that overlooks the town, there stands a stone monolith. A structure as ancient as the mountains themselves. The monolith's description leads me to the singular conclusion that it is a portal, one we have no knowledge of, other than it did not open when the fall of Agron began. In summary, Dreadmaster, should we implement your bold plan to use Agron as a staging ground, I believe from what I've seen in Eridan that it is ripe for the taking. Arrival in sufficient force in the Zephaniel Gate would, I believe, be enough to convince the defiled that lair in the sunken city to join our ranks. If it were in our possession, the breach of Corin's wall should be reopened, allowing the barbarians to pass into the plains of Eridan, for the resulting conflict can only further weaken any resistance by the humans. Perhaps even the corsairs of the Reaver's Run could be manipulated into advancing our cause. I now make for the monolith at Bloody Bridge. An undiscovered portal may just be the edge we seek. Blasphemous Vialcion the Seducer. And I think that should be where I'll call it. Next page is this, but we will read that next time. So, I gotta head out to actually do blood work soon, so maybe I'll do another video after I get back. I know I'll have to eat a lot of meat, otherwise I tend to get lightheaded from all of that. But I hope everyone out there had a good day. Oh wow, 2 hours and 23 minutes. I guess, yeah, I still have time to go, but it's a lot closer to that time than I thought it would be. So I might have some more time to eat something before I go do it, but I guess it means I'll just eat extra afterward. Okay. Anyway, hope everyone had a good day. Bye.